informative displays, restored engine, and gift shop, a tour of Gillette's home, the now famous castle, and a walk along the railbed of Gillette's second sister railroad. Here at the park, William Gillette, the man, and the legacy he left behind come together. William Gillette was born in 1853 in the Nook Farm area of Hartford, Connecticut. His father, Francis, was a Yale graduate and U.S. Senator. Francis married Elizabeth Hooker, a descendant of Hartford's founders, in 1834. William was the youngest of 6 children. Being much younger than his siblings, he was often treated as an only child. In his early years, William roamed the railroad stations and shops near his Hartford home. His love for the railroads dates from these years. Decades later, he wrote to a friend,
"This is the kind of boy that built in my school days when I infested the Hartford shops and roundabouts."
While a student, Gillette tinkered in his workshop, invented gadgets, and designed small devices. At age 13, he built a puppet stage in his father's carriage house and put on shows for the neighbors. William's parents wanted him to follow a more dignified line of work, possibly law or politics, something more suited to his family class and background. But William had his own thoughts. While in high school, he wrote a successful one-act farce and appeared in amateur productions. By graduation, he had found his calling, the theater. In 1873, at age 20, Gillette ventured onto the stage. Funded by his father, he took an apprenticeship in New Orleans and then returned to Hartford. In 1875, the Nook Farm community welcomed a new neighbor, Mark Twain. Twain recommended Gillette for a part in the Twain play, The Gilded Age, at the Globe Theater in Boston. Afterward, for 6 years into the early 1880s, Gillette worked his way through New England towns, doing small stage shows and performing as a stock actor in Boston, New York, and the Midwest. Years later, Gillette reminisced about those early days.
When I was young, I traveled around the small towns in New England, giving imitations of actors and celebrated people, and among them was an imitation of Mark Twain. I lived next to him all my early life. The celebrated story of Mark Twain, the one that first, I believe, made him famous, was called The Jumping Frog of Calaveras County.
But by the early 1880s, Gillette's interest expanded beyond the theater. In 1882, William Gillette married Helen Nichols of Detroit, also a stage actor. For 6 years, they traveled the country together and delighted in each other's company. Helen made the many apartments and hotel rooms their home and monitored William's health. But in 1888, at age 28, a ruptured appendix took Helen's life. William was devastated. He never remarried. Grief-stricken, Gillette did not act again for 6 years. He slipped into depression and tried to find solace in Nantucket, Florida, and Georgia. He settled in a cabin he named Thousand Pines in the hills near Tryon, North Carolina. Compounding his troubles, in the spring of 1890, Gillette contracted tuberculosis. A friend, whom he called Aunt Polly, nursed him back to health. Gillette resumed acting in 1894. He realized that the combination of writing, acting, producing, and directing would make him a successful man. He knew that the best way to fill theaters was by providing entertaining plots based on love, honor, integrity, and nobility. He also developed special effects in sound, lighting, and stage settings that thoroughly engaged patrons. At the height of his fame, William Gillette was a premier matinee idol. He was a slender 6 feet 3 inches tall with piercing blue eyes and a quiet, dignified manner. He would mesmerize an audience by standing motionless. He could steal a scene with a glance, a shrug, a finger twitch, or a slight inflection in his voice. In 1894, Gillette released his play, Too Much Johnson, which proved to be extremely popular. A year later, he produced his most popular play, Secret Service, a Civil War drama which attracted large audiences internationally. Then in 1898, at the age of 45, Gillette's agent introduced him to a character he had not heard of before, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes. Gillette read all of Doyle's stories and wrote the first adaptation of Sherlock Holmes for the stage. Gillette gave Holmes the deerstalker hat, bent briar pipe, magnifying glass, violin, and syringe. Doyle created the greatest detective in literature. Gillette turned him into a character that has withstood the test of time. Starting in 1899 and for the next 33 years, William Gillette crisscrossed the country and the Atlantic, playing the role of Sherlock Holmes 1,300 times. He regularly posed as Sherlock Holmes for posters and magazine covers and became the living personification of Doyle's imaginary detective. Holmes became so real, many thought that the character actually existed. His success made him famous even beyond his previous accomplishments. In 1900, his British tour alone netted Gillette nearly $100,000, about $2.6 million in today's money. During his acting years, Gillette never had a home. Instead, he preferred large but slow-moving houseboats. His first, the Holy Terror, was his home from 1896 until 1901. But it was his second boat that he lived aboard from 1901 until his home was completed in 1919. He called her the Aunt Polly after his caregiver in Tryon, North Carolina. The Aunt Polly was everything a wealthy individual could ask for: comfortable, luxurious, and plush. At 144 feet in length, the Aunt Polly featured a 40-foot main cabin, 4 staterooms, and 8-foot ceilings. In 1913, while sailing up the Connecticut River in the Aunt Polly, Gillette was struck by the scenery. He climbed the southernmost hill of a chain known locally as the Seven Sisters. He was so taken with the view that within a month he purchased the 122-acre hilltop. In 1914, he began work on his home, the Seven Sister Estate. In 1919, after 5 years of construction, his home was complete at a cost of $1 million, about $13 million today. Gillette added 2 towers, an apartment, and staff quarters to the house in 1923. He built his castle from local fieldstone with walls 5 feet thick at the base, tapering up to 2 feet at the top. The 14,000 square foot home has 24 rooms, the living room being the most elaborate of these, with a 19-foot high paneled ceiling, French doors, and a massive fireplace. Gillette used wood, glass, woven grass, and stone to create his small boy's dream of paradise. A stone dragon gargoyle, Tiffany lights, and a stage-like main room were among his various designs. And doors. Although some doors may look similar, no 2 of the 47 hand-carved doors within the home are the same. William Gillette never referred to his home as a castle. He did, however, refer to it once as his Adeline Stone. As his new house became his home, Gillette built a home for his longtime friend, companion, and valet, Yukitaka Osaki. Osaki's house was built and still stands along the Connecticut River, just north of the ferry landing. There Osaki lived, tended his garden, and kept his animals. By 1927, at the age of 74, Gillette had traveled the country for years, performing his plays in the role of Sherlock Holmes hundreds of times. While Gillette retired and then emerged from retirement several times, he increasingly retreated to his home. In 1927, Gillette returned to one of his earliest loves, the railroad. He had both the means and the desire to build his own railroad, and he did just that. Upon his 122 acres, Gillette constructed 3 miles of quarter-scale railroad. He called his rail line the Seven Sisters Railroad after the hilltop he lived on. Albert Einstein and his wife were reported to be terrified when Gillette was at the controls. President Calvin Coolidge simply enjoyed the rides his friend William offered. Other famous visitors included Charlie Chaplin and Helen Hayes. This 3-mile-long track explored the property, crossed bridges, trestles, and passed through a tunnel. In 1927, Fox Movie Tone made a 2-minute newsreel about Gillette's new Seven Sisters Railroad. In an era where silent movies were coming to an end, this was one of the earliest talkies.
Ever since I was an infant, for all I know before, I've had the idea that I'd like to drive a locomotive. People didn't tell me that I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth, but I've often heard that I was born with a steam engine in my mouth. And at last I got one. I had to build one just to drive it. It's a long while since I've heard it, but now I've got my wish back. And I'd like to see if somebody would like to want to take a ride, or maybe we'll have a little ride around the place. What do you say? All right, we'll do it. Good game, yes. All right. Goodbye.
Gillette's railroad, his home, his friendship with Osaki, and letter writing filled his later years. By degrees, age limited his activities. His final appearance as Sherlock Holmes took place in 1932 and his final stage performance in 1936. With deteriorating health, Gillette entered the beginning months of 1937, but he was fading. On April 29, 1937, William Gillette passed away. He was 83. He was laid to rest in the Riverside Cemetery in Farmington, Connecticut, next to his wife Helen. For 7 years, his relatives lived in the castle. By 1942, the railroad was sold to Lake Compounds in Bristol, Connecticut, where it served until 1991. In 1943, the state of Connecticut acquired the property, and Gillette Castle became the state's 40th state park. Gillette introduced the phrase, "Elementary, my dear fellow," which evolved over time to "Elementary, my dear Watson." It's among the most famous expressions in the English language. He wrote 13 original plays. His adaptation of Doyle's Sherlock Holmes made that character famous in parts of 3 centuries. In 1927, he published his only book, a mystery novel, The Astounding Crime on Torrington Road. And his early tinkerings continued into his adulthood as he received 4 U.S. patents, most notably for onstage effects. As with international stars of any era, today Gillette is all but forgotten. Nonetheless, he remains well anchored in Connecticut history as the man who built and lived in the state's most prominent castle. Thank you for visiting Gillette Castle State Park. The Department of Energy and Environmental Protection